The challenges for both legacy automakers and even the pure-play EV makers to make a profitable and compelling electric vehicle is becoming clearer and clearer as time goes on. This new market is not just about the electric drivetrain, but they now need to be software first, and soon will need to be autonomous as well. Many will likely be forced to reach out for help and form partnerships. Now, there are several options. First, the automaker will attempt to do it on their own. Then, as they've done in the past, they'll join together to create a joint venture. Then when that fails, they will partner with a low-cost producer, in this case, perhaps the Chinese EV automakers, which is what we're seeing now. And finally, they'll need to partner with the best in class, which is Tesla. So when might we see announcements of partnerships with Tesla? So today, let's ask Jeff Lutz. He has expertise and experience doing this for previous Fortune 100 companies he's worked with in the past. Thank you so much, Jeff. This is a question I've been asking you several times now, but it's just, we know partnerships are going to start being announced, and curious to what you think.
So Herbert, I love the four paths that you listed out, and that's actually what has happened in reality in other industries as well. You can think of smartphones and tablets and wearables is another one where that's happened in spades. So yeah, in terms of going at and trying to do it yourself, I think what a lot of people looked at Tesla and they said, all right, this is a startup. This started in, Silicon Valley, we're the behemoth, GM, Ford, Stellantis, which has, many auto brands under it. And, or a Nissan, Toyota, like we can figure this out. If Tesla could do it, we can do it. And I think if you look at it on the surface and you don't really study what the company did and some of the critical decisions that Tesla made, it can look easy or can look easier. But I actually do think that some of these companies actually looked at EVs and they said, wow, the cost per kilowatt hour on batteries, this, or, so I'm sure that over many years, they were doing unit economic models of various launches or products that they could do. They even announced many of them and they never shipped them. But when they actually went to look at the economics, either the external purchase price of these cost curves were not at where they thought they would be. And meanwhile, Tesla was actually kind of under the hood doing everything themselves. And they flipped the auto industry, the whole model of how vehicles are built, developed and built. They flipped it all on its head. And they said, all right, we're going to get everybody that does hardware, software, electrical, mechanical, software, everybody, supply chain, all under one roof in this place, in Silicon Valley. There's basically one or two buildings that they started all this development work in. And when you're working like that and you're not spreading all of the work amongst, 80% of the input, the economic input to the vehicle out to suppliers, you have a lot more control and you can take complexity out and you can make decisions that you can't control the culture of 80% of what you outsource. So I think this whole thing of like, how did Tesla do this? And everybody was, kind of from the outside looking in. I think their first attempt was like, well, if Tesla could do it, we'll figure it out and we'll do it. We'll take our current model that we're building ICE vehicles with today. And since people are willing to spend more, Tesla's selling these Model S and X vehicles for over $100,000. This was the beginning of, after they IPO'd, that we'll sell expensive vehicles because it's our GM and Ford brand, people will buy them. And that just didn't work out with the, some of the first launches. Did they sell like the GM Bolt and so forth? Some of these vehicles did sell in some amount of volume, but it really was kind of a rounding error in terms of what Tesla was doing. And, in terms of these multiple stages, the next thing they look at is, okay, well, if I can't do this on my own, is there something I could buy, out there that I could, I could acquire, or is there some partnership that I could form? And what Tesla did in the beginning is, if you looked, they didn't have the assets to do their own battery development, cell development. So they went out and they partnered with Panasonic, but they made these decisions in 2013, 2014, very early time frame. And then they actually built a factory, a massive factory in North America, 2015, 2016. These are decisions that the GMs and Fords of the world, Ford still hasn't launched their JV battery factory yet. And GM just started ramping Ultium over the last year, which is 2024 now, and they're still not at their volume goals in their JV factory. So 2024 GM is like what Tesla was doing with Panasonic, back in the 2014 to 2016 timeframe. So you're talking an 8 to 10 year lead just on battery JV partnerships. And then over that time frame, Tesla obviously started developing their own cell to not only design and build themselves, but to also work with partners in the industry because they need, all the energy possible. So that next phase of like doing the joint venture partnerships on battery for in this example is a stage that Tesla was at, almost a decade ago, and the others are just kind of discovering and getting into right now. Someone like a BYD has obviously been at that whole time, so they're kind of in a different. I would put them on a different level. But in terms of the partnership piece, they're really just getting ramped up on that now. The next thing you do is like, okay, well, if I can't compete, they looked at China, for example, and a GM developed EV or a Ford developed EV shipping there, even being built there, wasn't economically viable. The way that they designed, they do just handfuls of like Mach-E's out there, for example, very small volumes. And they've basically gotten out of, even both in ICE and EV, they've gotten out of that market. They've been run out of China. And Tesla's competing there. Tesla's got their own factory. They're now starting to do development work there. They have a huge presence. They really set the stage for how EV should be developed and ramped. And you see a lot of the China automakers copying, whether it's castings, whether it's certain styles of manufacturing, whether it's these large factories and so forth. There's a lot of imitation occurring in China of Tesla, but Tesla is competing on their own. And Tesla has a model of, they start where the consumer is, they start where the geography is they want to compete in, and they put a massive factory in that so they have the source of supply as close to the customer as possible. And if you look at, basically, again, I go back to China with GM and Ford, they've essentially been run out of it. So now their next stage, you see what Stellantis is doing. They partner with a company called Leapmotor, and you see VW partnered with Xpeng. And that's the next stage you're going to see. Is you're going to now see these full-on, they call it white labeling, where you have some input to a vehicle. The Chinese automakers are developing vehicles. They're like, look, this is how we know how to economically develop vehicles at the right price point to serve this market. If you want to put your VW branding or your Stellantis, branding, whether it's Chrysler or whatever brand they want to use, would add value in this region. But we're going to develop the region. You can slap your branding on it, and I think we're at that stage right now. Like I said, VW is doing that. Leap Motors are doing some joint development work together with, and we're at that stage right now where they can't compete in certain regions. So now they're working with partners. And then the final thing is that there's full on, mergers that could occur where you've got, GM acquiring a particular Chinese auto company or Ford, for example, if they can't compete in that region. So partnership first, then maybe full on acquisition. Who knows what's going to happen? But these are kind of the stages. And then that final stage is, by the way, back in those partnership stages, those don't normally end very well. They can sometimes work and function for a year or two, but it's not a 5 or 10-year solution. And there's examples where they work, like in network infrastructure. Sometimes that works quite well. And it worked in cellular infrastructure as well. There's a lot of partnerships that occurred. But on the client side or the consumer side, the margins are a lot lower. And when the margins are a lot lower and you're in a partnership, you're essentially splitting low margins together. So that's where you kind of get to the final stage, which is now you go look at the market leader and you say, should we partner with them? Are they offering to help? No, so Tesla's not positioned themselves as a walled garden, like another industry, another competitor has positioned themselves, where they're not really going to sell their services per se to another partner. They're going to run them on their own devices. Tesla has not positioned themselves that way. Tesla's positioned themselves to be very open. Supercharger network, we've seen them, they've open sourced their patents. Even their most recent, steer by wire or 48 volt architecture, they sent out, a description of how to do this. So from a partnership perspective, Tesla has shown themselves to be very open. And so the final stage would be is like, if you go back to Tesla's mission, they want sustainable transport to be scaled. So if they got the right cost model, I could see them partnering with someone and giving them kind of a pretty decent deal where Tesla still makes money from it, but it allows the partner to be able to scale. I think the first examples we saw were on the supercharger network. You may start seeing some examples with batteries in the future once I think Tesla gets 4680 to be running as a very competitive solution. But I would say the near term thing could be with full self-driving and licensing that. They have a hardware solution. They've got the engineering behind that. So how do you actually integrate it into a vehicle? That's a service that they could sell. And then of course the actual network infrastructure, the training they could sell, and then the ongoing support of it in terms of adding clients or subscribers to the network and Tesla managing that whole network. They could sell that as a service. And then it will allow these automakers to sell full self-driving services to their consumers on their brand. And I see that happening. And I see those announcements starting, fairly imminently. If they want to integrate Tesla's solution in their vehicle, it's going to take them a couple of years to do it. So the first thing that they try to do is they try to do all this stuff themselves. When they realize, like, look, I've reached a maximum, it's either not economically viable, it's not something that could scale, then they go out and they try to, see if they can source it from someone. And then eventually I think it's going to come around full, do a 360 basically. And then they're going to look at Tesla, who I think is going to be the market leader at the time with a very scalable solution. The other thing is you don't want to partner with a very expensive, high cost solution. Some of these robotaxi solutions out there are equipping vehicles with tens of thousands of dollars of sensors. So the way that Tesla set themselves up to be economically scalable on their own, they've actually also set themselves up to be very attractive for partners to work with.
Yeah. So, okay, you basically covered everything I was going to ask you, right? So the scenario is that there's convergence, right? Many of these car companies now, legacy and even the pure play, they've been suffering with low profitability and negative profitability. They're losing money for every car they sell. They're getting desperate. Number two, you want to partner with a low cost provider, and that's why they reached out to Chinese. But then eventually you're going to want to partner with the best in class and low cost provider, which Tesla has the potential to do that, not only in the hardware, but also the software and then FSD. And so
Right.
It's imminent, right? I mean, it's like, that's how I feel. I know you kind of feel the same way. I know it's a gut feel, right? Because we don't know, because obviously, partnership could be years. You never know how long these things take. But I like your point that the other factor that you brought up was that if you want to have, let's say, FSD, it's not like you partnered this month and then 3 months later you can just turn it on. It will take you 3 years. And so many of these guys are already factoring out that maybe in 3 years we're not going to be doing so well. We better partner now so that maybe in 3 years this could save us. It's going to be a lifeline for us. I like that point a lot.
And look at superchargers: low cost, high performance, and scaled. And low cost, high performance already at scale. So look at FSD. Once they get it low cost, high performing, they still have to check that box, and it's scalable. I think it'll follow a similar model. But if you don't check all those boxes, why would you want to partner with someone that doesn't check all those boxes? So I think if you can look as recently as supercharging as something as a model that could actually scale. And that's where Tesla gets into the sum of the parts conversation of, is it worth more in various pieces and chunks than it is as a whole? When you start being able to to license and scale other people's businesses with your solutions, that's when your business can become a lot more valuable.
And I think what will happen is, like, there's 20, 30 automakers out there. So, it doesn't have to be Ford. Maybe it's Mazda, like a smaller player that then partners with Tesla, and then the others will fall. Once one does it, then they realize, oh my gosh, we better also do it too. So I think it's going to happen sooner than later. It's exciting to see, maybe even this year, if not probably next year. So thank you, Jeff. That was great. This is something that's right up your wheelhouse. You know this stuff. You have done all these, so many partnerships at the Fortune 50, Fortune 100 level. So I appreciate your thoughts on this. Follow Jeff on X at the Jeff Lutz.
Yep.
Jeff
Thank you,
Lutz.
Herbert.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.